In this video, I will show you how to use profiles, the light panel, and how to watermark and export your work with Adobe Lightroom CC. Before you begin editing a photo, it's important to turn up the brightness of your screen. You want to make sure that you can see a full range of values and colors for editing, and your keyboard might have shortcuts for adjusting the brightness, such as the F2 key, or you can do the adjustment through your display settings as I'm doing here. You may not have seen any difference in my screen because my screen recording is always set to bright. Back in Lightroom CC, choose a photo that you've already imported. I would suggest an image with a sky and clouds if you have it. If not, then any photo with a variety of objects and colors will do nicely. Come up to the top right to open the editing panel, and then we will look at profiles. You can either click here and browse all profiles, or you can click this little icon to open them up. You can make any profile your favorite, and we've got our basics here of color and monochrome, black and white. You've got a lot of other options within these categories, such as artistic. If you hover over, you can see a preview of how your photo will look once the profile is applied. I bet you didn't think there would be so many choices for black and white. If you're using a raw file, you'll see even more categories. And after you have checked out all of your options, you'll then narrow it down to one that you like. You'll click on it and it will open this slider. Pull the slider right or left to increase or decrease the effect. To reset a slider, double-click on the circle or double-click on the word to send it back to the center. I'm going to go back to black and white because I want you to notice how the profile affects the sky and clouds specifically. And when I shoot on black and white film, I always use a red filter to bring out the contrasts in the sky. I love the noir setting on the iPhone for the same reason. But I'm going to choose this black and white 06 effect. And since this is a dramatic change from the original, I'm going to pause in my editing and I'm going to come down to the bottom right corner and open up the versions panel. And this will allow you to capture the changes you've made already. So clicking the plus sign to create a new version, I'll call it black and white 06. And now I can see my original and the version I've just created. Clicking the X to get rid of that panel, I'm going to come back to my editing panel and click the caret to open up my light options. Notice that the sliders are all defaulted in the middle. If you're familiar with presets, those do move the sliders, but profiles do not. I'll demonstrate the extremes of each of these, starting by adjusting the exposure slider, which will adjust your overall brightness or darkness in the photo. Contrast is going to show the difference between the light and the dark tones in the photo. You can go for high contrast or low. The highlights slider will adjust to the bright areas only. So in this photo, it's mainly changing my sky. The shadows slider does the opposite, and it will adjust the dark areas, like the right side of my image. The whites slider adjusts the lightest lights, and the blacks slider adjusts the darkest dark areas in your image. I'll set mine now to my preferences, and you usually don't want to go to extremes with your sliders, and there is a helpful trick to help to keep the tones in check and make sure that you're not going to these extremes if you don't want to. I'll demonstrate that in a moment with the whites slider. I'll hold down the Alt or Option key on the keyboard and drag the slider. It will turn my screen completely black. And as I drag it the opposite way, little white pixels will show up. If you have too many white pixels in one area, then those whites will be blown out in the image. I'll show you the same extremes on the image. Moving the slider to the left, I get dull whites in the clouds, and to the right, I get blown out whites. Holding the Alt or Option key again, you want to go to the point where you just start to see some of the white pixels appear in the image. And you can do the same with the black slider, but the colors are reversed. So that would be too much and not enough. And then back on the image, notice too much and not enough the other direction. So using that Alt or Option key is a great trick to just get to that point in the middle so that the image is very pleasing. But again, this is just a tool. You can, of course, go with your own preferences. And unless you are also going with an extreme look, like a high key or low key light in your photos, I always think it's a good idea to make sure you see some true black, some true white, and a wide variety of grays between, representing a full gray scale. Let's add another version of this, and I will call it Light Adjustment. Click Create, and now you can compare and contrast the changes between your profile, your light adjustments, and your original. But if you don't like these changes, you can always click the 3 dots and you can delete that version. You may get a pop-up box warning you that the deletion is permanent, and you could change your mind. Next, you'll come up to the top right and you'll click on the Share button, and we're going to export the image with your new changes. In this panel, you can change your file type, you can change the dimensions. I like to change it to full size and up the quality to 100%, particularly if the size of the file doesn't matter. You can also include a watermark. Check the check mark and hit the settings gear. Now, I love that Lightroom CC has this feature. Before, I always had to do this using the text box in Photoshop. Anyway, the watermark probably defaults to your name. I prefer no copyright symbol, my name. Use your last initial if you're under 18. And I add photo digital design. Be sure to double check your spelling. I always misspell design as desing. You can also change the font. I think Snell looks fancy. You can change the style depending on the font. You might just have a couple of style choices. You can rotate the image in different directions, change the color of it from black to white. You can add a drop shadow, though I don't quite see a difference in mine. You can change the location in the picture plane. You may adjust the size of it. I prefer to go a smaller size. You may change the opacity, either transparent or opaque. I prefer somewhere in the middle. And you can offset it either horizontally within the picture plane or vertically in the picture plane. And if you can't get the slider exactly where you want it, you can click on the number on the left-hand side and you can type in the exact number where you want it placed. Whatever settings you choose, remember that the photograph should be the star and not your watermark. You'll click Done. You also have more options, but the defaults should be fine. You shouldn't need to change anything. So then you'll export the one photo and choose a location where to save it. I always save it on my Creative Cloud in the folder for this class. After it's exported and synced, when you go back to your Creative Cloud files, you should be able to see the original version and the new version, and this will show what you have learned through this video. If you're on a Mac, you can select the two images and then hit the spacebar on your keyboard. That will quickly open it up into a preview, and you can use your arrow keys to go back and forth between the two. So that is how you use profiles and the light panel, and how to watermark and export your work using Adobe Lightroom CC.